The only people I know that kept I did know some soldiers, that kept kill counts, which you were very, very wary of as a commander. Yeah, because why are they doing that out there?
Let's start off with the point at which you have an insight into this, because you trained at Sandhurst the same time that Prince Harry was trained there. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So let me ask you, first of all, let's get this one out of the way completely directly then. We have heard extracts from Prince Harry's book in which he talks about what some might refer to as the kill count. And he says that the British Army taught him to other the enemy and to see the enemy as removing, like a piece on a chessboard, the bad elements before they could turn against the good elements. Is that what Sandhurst taught you?
Well, look, I can see where he's coming from, but depending on, actually treating people as chess pieces, then you're never told to that at all. If you're going into combat, first of all, you're choosing, in a professional or volunteer military to put yourself forward, to put into a position where that could happen. And the training then, to some degree, since the Second World War, when they started training elite troops, and then beyond that, and through Vietnam, and now has been really quite carefully honed after 70 years, is about desensitization. Of course, it's about socialization, so that your values and your reaction to commands are, immediate. Your values take on those of the army, that you're of the right stuff for the army, especially as an officer, of course. And a part of that is desensitization. Yeah, that's what happens. That's what it is. You can't. Medics are desensitized. Doctors are desensitized. Dentists are desensitized. It's just a part of the trade. So there is an element of that that's true. But being taught to treat people as chess pieces, I would have said no. One of the crucial things I remember from being a platoon commander in Sangin was when in 2006, one of my mates came back from the tour with the Parachute Regiment, the first really hairy tour that was quite famous at the time. And I said, what did you learn? What's the biggest lesson you learned? And he said, don't let your blokes lose their humanity. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? I wanted you to tell me what to do in an L-shaped ambush or in a hot HLS, And it took me about halfway through the tour in Afghanistan, and I saw exactly what he meant. And that is really an important part. And I think the moral part of leadership, quite apart from kill counts, people are killing people and people are getting killed. And actually keeping that humanity is an incredibly important part. And it was in there in training. It could have been, I think, as we went through Afghanistan and Iraq and the army became more experienced, that became more and more important, and that in the training element. So, but I can also sympathize with Harry because, he starts off as a JTAC, Joint Tactical Air Controller, I think is what if my memory serves me. And then, he's and he has to lose that tour because it's broken by the media, comes out, and then he goes, okay, well, what can I do that's safer, that I can do, even if they know that the Taliban know that I'm out there for it leaks. So he becomes a weapons officer on an Apache, which is a very, very lethal piece of kit. Bailed out us, British soldiers, American soldiers, countless times, NATO soldiers, when we were in the proverbial, and it's got amazing optics and really good guns and missiles. And so, if you're slightly removed from combat and you're going into it the whole time like that, I can totally see why it feels like chess pieces, but it doesn't mean to say that I can see why he's drawing the line, but I don't think it's as on the nose as potentially. I haven't read the book, so I don't know, but as potentially as this extract says.
It's really interesting to get your take, because there's been so much talk, there's been a lot of criticism of what he has said. But, you have been there, and in the theatre of war, as you said, that big element of don't lose your humanity, but also you're saying there is part of you, as I'm sure there are other veterans as well, who can comprehend the attitude that he has put on paper.
100%. They're not mutually exclusive. You know, you don't have to lose your humanity and also be desensitized. I'll tell you something, and I wrote about this in my book. You know, war it drags you to desensitizes, you know, to desensitization. It is a brutal thing. And if you're being killed and blown up and killing, that is what ultimately comes your humanity, essentially. And what are you willing to sacrifice to survive is something you have to, some people grapple with, some people don't, you know. An interesting thing is, you know, 1% apparently of the population is psychopaths, 2% in a military. I imagine in the infantry it might be double that, 4%. I wouldn't be surprised, and I have no knowledge of this, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was in the special forces, double that again. You're talking, some people just like it. Some people just like blowing stuff up. And guess what? You know, when they're out in Iraq and Afghanistan, you know, those people have a role. Sometimes they're actually quite useful. But for the most of us, it's about, one, surviving, actually coming back, first of all, physically able, you know, and secondly, mentally able. And in a leadership role like Harry you initially was anyway, I think that's a very important thing to concentrate on. But I also remember coming back, you know, I came back from Afghanistan, I did 5 months and then came back and I went straight into my captain's course. And we did a part of that captain's course is on weapons effects. And an RAF guy came in to talk to us about, like, what was the effect of a JDAM, like a 500-pounder bomb, of which we'd seen them dropped. You know, there were craters outside our forward operating base. And I did find that jarring, you know, having seen, because he was removed from it. You know, his sort of combat role is like, okay, supporting the troops, and it's all good support, but actually watching what is the effect of a 500-pound bomb on the ground on people. Probably, even though he would watch back on the battlefield damage assessment videos and trying to work out he's removed. It is to some degree like a computer game. And even if, you know, the Apaches can get close and they would know what they're doing because they're using their cannons, but even then it's still a bit removed, you know.
I think what has surprised so many people is putting a number on it, as Prince Harry has done in this book, because I'm sure if I asked you the same question, what's your kill count, you wouldn't answer it, would you?
No.
And I have never met any military person from any of the armed forces who would answer it or put it out there publicly. So do you think, were you surprised when you saw this figure?
I think there's one, look, as he says apparently in the book, I've got the video, you know, I've got the video evidence from the battle damage assessments, yes, but a lot of those are only estimates, as my understanding is, because you've got a lot of dust. Things are happening, you know, at high speeds and high velocities, and so especially if you fire a hellfire or whatever like that, it's obscured. But yeah, you can make a decent enough estimate. But look, a lot of soldiers will talk about killing. You know, there's books you can read about Afghanistan where people are killing people and admit it. I don't think they say at the end of the book, I killed 14 or I killed 4. Now, I'm not sure, you know, but I've read fairly heavily about Second World War accounts and Vietnam accounts. So, yeah, I think, but I'll tell you, the other thing is, like, it's not as if soldiers don't talk about this stuff. That's the other thing. They do, especially in the right circles, in their own circles. They obviously have, amongst their mates, sometimes they have guilt. Sometimes they have no guilt whatsoever. Like, and you can actually be, funny enough, you can be in that situation, just be like, it was kill or be killed. I don't carry it with me. You know, both of us, you can argue the rights and the wrongs of why we were in that situation. Him being an anarcho-Taliban and I being a platoon commander in the British Army, you can argue the rights and wrongs, but once you're in the situation, you know, so people they don't necessarily carry it with them. There's lots of different opinions, and in the same way, I think there's some people are probably much more open about sharing what their experiences, and some people are less so. I wouldn't be surprised if the publisher pushed them, but that may be the nature of the game he's in, you know.
Or perhaps a bit more of a Californian influence about talking openly about your feelings and your sentiments. I wonder though,
That's a good point. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, to move on though to the security element of this, what are your thoughts? Because again, there has been a lot of discussion about whether raising the spotlight on what happened in Afghanistan and the British forces' involvement out there, and Prince Harry having been part of that, whether that has heightened the security risk for him, for his family, for his children, and indeed for other members of the royal family, given we're very close now, a few months away from King Charles's coronation.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's always heavy security presence for anything to do with the senior royals. That's a different kettle of fish altogether. And I also think it's quite far removed from those elements of the royal family. I do think, you know, jihadists have a long memory. We know this from the Charlie Hebdo attacks, for example, and the Dutch filmmaker, I think, who was killed. So I don't think the Taliban are, for example, going to be, you know, it's grist to the mill for them as a good PR op. But I think for the slightly deranged, often jihadists, it probably does click up the risk meter a little bit. And I'm not sure of Prince Harry's security arrangements or whatever. He probably figured this in, you would imagine. But if you're a security manager, yeah, you'd be like, yep, that's definitely a threat, you know.
That said, I mean, from a personal point of view, do you think it's wise what he did? Talking about the numbers.
Personally, no. No, I wouldn't. I think for two reasons. One, it just comes across a little bit brazen, a bit on the nose. And personally, there is that risk to your own family. But each to their own, and you know, hopefully there's no big blowback from it. I've seen obviously a lot of people, and certainly my military mates, you know, in and out, etc., would be quite critical, you know. But that's just the way. I can also see why he did it and sympathize to some degree.
It's interesting, yeah, because we have heard from various different people, some senior former members of the military, other people who knew Prince Harry whilst he was out there, and pretty much like you, some people have been very much along the lines of it was a big mistake, but there has been that sneaking in of, well, I kind of have a bit of a comprehension of what he said and why he said it. Do you think, I mean, are these any discussions that you've had with your friends who you served with?
The only people I know that kept I did know some soldiers, you know, that kept kill counts, which you were very, very wary of as a commander. Yeah, because why are they doing that out there now? But everybody knows, ish, thereabouts. You know, you have to come back, like in the infantry perspective, you come back, you're ambushed, you come back and you say you have to do a battle damage assessment. You know, you're like, yeah, we got ambushed from here, we opened fire, we returned fire, we hit two of them, we don't know if we killed them, and then maybe you find out later, yeah, one of them was killed, you know, etc. That's what happens. So you know who fired that gun, and the person who fired that weapon knows who generally knows who fired it. Other situations, yeah, like you get ambushed at close range, and someone fires a grenade launcher at people, and you know, everyone knows, but Jesus, they saved you, you know. So but kill counts is a different thing, you know, and it's very deeply personal. Like some people may never mention that again, you know, what they did, even in the platoon. It's just like, yeah, I got to, and that's it. And other people will maybe struggle with it or not, and talk about it openly. Like it depends. But what I do notice is most people keep those chats for the people that were there or their close mates. But particularly the people that were there, because they can understand, you know. So yeah, look, it's a complex thing. It's very personal. It's really quite intimate. especially in the way the infantry do their fighting. It's a little less intimate from an Apache. Um, but yeah, he's trying to be honest. Is it the most thought through place, to be honest? Judging by the blowback, probably not. But I it's not for me, but I wouldn't really hold any major grudge or anything like that.
It's interesting because just that overall view, it was very clear, I think, to the public over the years that Prince Harry was very proud of the role that he had in the military, and that he had at the time wanted to continue, but he couldn't, and his life followed a different path. So the military being a family, and it's very much known that the military is a family. Those from the inside talk about that camaraderie, and many people who have left the military or retired still hold that close-knit connection with the people that they served with. So I'm just wondering, really, where this puts Prince Harry in the history books in terms of what he's come out and said, but equally what he did when he was in the military.
That's a good question. Look, the military are incredibly cohesive when you're in, because it's a total institution. You have no free time, certainly not if you're in, and you kind of live most days with the blokes and your mates, and that's what it is. It's like a big team which is on tour all the time, you could argue. But when you leave, it's different. You're back to one UK Civ Div, as they call it. So you're out on your own. You're an individual. Of course, you have the links in, but it is very different. And then what you notice, my experience is you keep in touch with. I was in charge probably of 28 guys, but like, how many am I still in touch with? Like 4 of the actual platoon, and then a good few of the officers as well. But it is, you notice that actually when you go out, it's more about kind of who do you really get on with, etc., as you'd imagine it is, as it is in Civvy Street. So you wouldn't know with Harry. He's a royal. Like, he's got obviously a big social life, very busy. You wouldn't know actually how many connections he had with his platoon. I imagine he had a few. I'm sure he was still in contact with a few of his officer friends. You wouldn't know, and so how much he'd already left behind, I suppose, is the point. It's not as if you're constantly in WhatsApping with your whole platoon, and everybody's bomb bursted anyway. They've gone off to their new roles, and amazing how fast the military changes once you leave, because everyone's rotating every 2 years and getting promoted, and it just makes you feel old very quickly.
Do you remember Prince Harry from your Sandhurst days?
Yeah, like I remember how hard it was for him, and I remember we'd be out on tabs, basically forced marches around the back of Sandhurst, and there'd be photographers jumping, trying to, hiding in the bushes trying to get him. I remember how young he was, because he was young, and he did, unlike a lot of us, he'd gone, I think, without a degree, so he's like, and I thought that was the guys who get in at 18, right, into Sandhurst at 18, without, I'm not saying the degrees to be all and end and all, but there's a fair bit of respect for them, because you have to be mature as well, and also like switched on. So there was a bit of respect there as well. So yeah, that was it really, the two abiding memories. I wasn't in his platoon or anything like that, so nothing very, very close. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I do wonder, just looking at some of the stories that have emerged today, I think there was a story saying that he'd missed a drugs test or something, and he'd been called to Buckingham Palace or something whilst there was a regular drugs test at Sandhurst, and I just thought, what are they looking for? Well, what are people I know in the media digging around looking for? Is there a story there that hasn't been told? And if so, how much worse is it than anything he's put in the book already? But
I have no idea about that. Absolutely no idea about that. I mean, like, the thing about the military and drugs is that, like, it's representative society. It just takes people from society. So, like, yeah, it has a zero drugs policy, and you know, 99 point whatever it is, 9% of people abide by that and understand that while they're in, they don't do it. But some people don't. You know, some people try to get away with it. And you can imagine, I do know, like when the blokes are back on holiday, on leave, and all their mates are taking drugs and they've had a few drinks, that's when it really is about, you know, right, no, I don't do this, you know, not now. But they do the compulsory drugs testing. They don't, if they didn't catch anyone, they'd stop doing them. You know, so they catch people and they're hoofed out usually very quickly, and that's just the red line, and it deserves to be there. So we can't be naive about the whole thing, but it's small numbers.
But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we've covered your thoughts on what's been put out there by Prince Harry. We talked about the security element of it and how, you know, the army kind of people in the army reacting to it. And so I think we've covered it all, which is great. So I do appreciate it. Look, thank you very much.
No problem.
All right.
Pleasure, Anna. Hope it goes well.
Have a good afternoon. All right. Thanks.
You too.
Bye now.
See ya.